Satnam, and welcome to another show of In Conscious Living. It's a show where we get inspirational people every day. You know who we've got on today? We've got an esteemed historian, Gurinder Singh Mann. Would that be correct? You know, Sangaji, I know I always say I get the guest to introduce themselves, but you know, you're well known as far as I'm concerned. So, but you know, so listen. Thank you so much. You know, Sangaji came all the way from the Midlands today. You know, and it really is an honour to have you on today. You know,
That's
so
okay.
Thank you. And tell us, you know, you've been doing some amazing research, and before we came on here, Sangaji, I was just talking about the amazing, almost like the adventures that you've been up to, you know. So, you know, let me introduce you. Come, Gurinder Singh Mann, thank you.
Okay, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thanks, Rajinder. Great to be here on the show today. Yeah, it's been a long journey for myself. Been doing research in Sikhism for just over 10 years now, really, looking at different aspects of the religion, journeys across the world, really, in terms of getting inspiration of how Sikhism is represented, trying to get information from other religions and how that, you know, can feed into how Sikhism
that makes sense, I guess, because we are all, in sense, interconnected, aren't we?
Exactly. So, you know, sometimes I've been down to, like, say, Rome, for instance, and I'll look at the culture down there and see, you know, what's the impact the Rome culture may have had on the Sikhism, for instance. And then, you know, I've been to Greece, I've been to, like, some museums in Corfu, for instance, and it's interesting because they've got like an Asian arts museum down there, and then you actually see some different facets of what they see in terms of, like, say, the Khanda or Garban. So in ancient Greece, for instance, they used to actually trade swords and Garbans, and they used to use that as currency, for instance.
Really?
Yeah, so, you know, the way I've always viewed research and looking at different facets of the religion is how do we actually, beyond the boundaries of not just Sikhism, but how do we actually bring it to, like, a different audience, a different stage, and so it becomes all-embracing. You know, need to take the religion now from the steppes of Punjab into the world, and we need to show it in a different light. That's what I think we need to be doing, and as part of my research, what I've always tried to do is try to bring something different, something original, try to research something interesting. Because when I was, like, growing up reading books on Sikhism, they were all the same.
Yeah, I can connect with you on that. Okay, yeah.
So, you know, I started doing my research back in 97.
97, so we're 97, we're 2012, isn't it? So it's a few years.
It's a few years.
What was the interest? And apart from that, what made you go that step further? You know, I had an interest, you know, but, you know, you took that extra step.
That's correct.
What was that?
I think the key thing was the catalyst, so to speak, was when my brother, actually, who's in the studios here today.
You can't see us on the tube, but he is there, and he's having a big smile.
He actually went to India in '95 and brought back the book by J.D. Cunningham, The History of the Sikhs. It was, you know, written just after the Anglo-Sikh Wars, but, you know, it's a fairly straightforward...
So what sort of year would that have been written?
It would have been roughly around the 1850 period.
All right.
Just after the Anglo-Sikh Wars. And in that actual text itself, apart from going into the history of Sikhism and, you know, talking about the Anglo-Sikh Wars, what Cunningham was an officer at that time, he actually mentions a Granth, He mentions in there something called Dasam Granth. And, you know, I'm reading it. I'm not quite understanding what's going on here because, you know, we were all brought up to understanding that, you know, we all do Matha Tek to Guru Granth Sahib, you know, that's the Granth of the Sikhs, etc. So, you know, and and it's really bugging me now. So I'm reading it, I'm reading what is written inside it, I'm trying to make some sense out of it. So I do a bit of exploration, try and find out a little bit more, but I'm not getting too far at all now. So I'm thinking, hold on, there's something's afoot here. Then why would a Britisher in 1850 write or talk about a Granth, but yet when I'm asking some questions and asking people, they don't seem to know anything about it. So, you know, it kind of mystified me a little bit. So that is when I kind of started my journey in terms of doing a master's degree in 97. I started in 97. I did my master's degree in South Asian religions at De Montfort University, you see. and the key thesis, motivation, or the idea was to actually research the Sri Dasam Granth Sahib.
Where did you get your information from? Because,
Yeah.
you know, that it's one thing to, I mean, in those days, the internet was there, but...
It was just starting.
Exactly, because I was doing my dissertation at the same time.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
But, you know, but the information...
Limited.
It is very limited, and the information that is there,
yeah,
you know, as far as I'm concerned, how do you even verify it?
100%. I mean, at that time it was very difficult because nowadays the internet is like full of information. You know, if you go to right sources, you can see.
These are pre-Google days. You know?
Exactly, and you know, I remember using like Google search engines like Alta Vista, which I don't think they exist anymore.
My dissertation was on search engines.
Exactly, there you go. So you'll know a little bit about that, and you know, so the information you get was crude and is very limited.
Yes.
So I had to embark on different facets of how I would actually approach the subject. I mean, obviously, at a university, you get access to journals and you know, things like that. I mean, books are important. I'd start a lot in terms of actually going to a place like the British Library.
Okay.
So, you know, I'm from Leicester, born in Leicester, okay.
But you still make the journey?
I would make the journey to the British Library, you know, get these journals out, get these...
Quick question. Where is the British Library? I know it's in London.
Yeah.
But where?
It is near the St Pancras King's Cross railway station.
Okay, anyone can just go in there and...
Yeah, you need to get yourself a membership, and then that's it, you're in. You can actually...
Sorry to interrupt you there, but, you know, it's...
No, it's important because, you know, a lot of people do say to me, well, you know, the material for researching, where do you find it? Well, British Library is one of the key sources for actually, you know, doing research. So that was one of the areas where I used to go travel quite a bit to get information from. I made some contacts in the Punjab as well. You know, so kind of got some oral stories in terms of how the Granth was perceived, you know, so because my dissertation was looking at the role of Dasam Granth in Khalsa, a lot of the information actually came from the Bania itself. Yeah. So the recitation of Jap Sahib, for instance, you know, and, you know, looking at what the actual compositions meant for the Khalsa. So when we're talking about Khande de Pohol, for instance, what are the Bania which are recited? So, you know, it was fairly simplified. Yes. Is what I was doing. I wasn't going into much detail at that particular point because the whole idea was to show the importance of the Dasam Granth in Khalsa. So
that makes it like an overall view.
That's right.
Without delving too much,
100%.
because it gets a bit complicated.
It can do, yes, and it has done.
Yes, it's a few years now.
Exactly,
so,
and it has done as well. So at that point, it's very simplified, just trying to break down the compositions, a little bit of history, talking in terms of, you know, where the Granth was composed, some locations, dates, etc. So very easy way of understanding what the Dasam Granth was about. What was the mission of Guru Gobind Singh? What was the reasoning behind why he would write a Granth? So, you know, it was...
Would you say your interest has grown since then?
I would say it's grown 100-fold since that particular time, because when I was actually doing my thesis, it was like 4 different areas I was, you know, focusing on. First one was obviously the scripture, Sri Dasam Granth Sahib. The other thing was actually looking at who venerates the Dasam Granth. So therefore, my actual interest went towards the Nihangs.
Yes.
The Gali Nihangs, how do they fit into the equation? How do they fit into the equation of the Sri Dasam Granth? But how do they fit into the equation of Khalsa? But how do they fit into the equation of Sikhs per se? Yes. So that was the second step, which, you know, I was looking at that point as well.
I suppose, would you have to go visit them personally? Because it's more for oral sort of...
At that point, I didn't, because the information I needed for my thesis at that particular time was suffice in terms of what we call book knowledge.
Yes, of course.
So I didn't need to go into the oral histories at that particular point. But then later on, I've been down to see some Nahang Dals. I've spoken with Nahangs, and you know, you get an insight different from book knowledge. There's book knowledge, there's oral history, you know. So there's a different way of approaching the subject. The third area was actually looking at the Singh Sabha movement.
of 1920 or something?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, obviously, it started
of course,
earlier,
yes.
but you know,
Yeah.
leading up to the points of the 1920s.
Yes. Okay.
And the key thing in terms of looking at what was the impact of this revivalist movement, so to speak, in terms
Sure.
of, you know, and what kind of legacy that left for Sikhism and that brand of Sikhism which is represented now.
Yes. Okay. Oh
So
wow.
there were kind of the three key areas which I kind of focused on.
It sounds exciting just listening to it. Actually, I'm almost jealous I didn't take that. Yeah, you could have told me then.
Well, you know, you've got to be there to, you know, you've got to be in it to win it. I mean, I think one of those things at that time was, I think it was the first thesis for 50 years from a Westerner
Wow.
on the Sri Dasam Granth Sahib. So,
Do you know what that it almost sounds unbelievable, doesn't it?
it is and it isn't, because it was C.H. Llewellyn who actually, you know, did that work back in...
Llewellyn, Welsh origin.
Okay, there you go.
Hey, I know something.
He was actually American, actually.
Origin, I said.
Okay, that's fine. He wrote his, you know, the Granth of Guru Gobind Singh's, the kind of book, the Brotherhood. So his book was fairly kind of simplistic as well, which was interesting because again, it didn't go into too much into depth.
I suppose they're looking from their point of view as well, isn't it?
100%. So you know, so for 50 years from that time, there was no English kind of representation or someone from the West writing about the Sri Dasam Granth Sahibs until 2001 when I actually finished the completion.
So that's quite a big time span, really.
100%, yeah.
Was it because simply, do you believe, due to the lack of knowledge, lack of understanding, lack of interest, or just...
I think there's a number of key factors. I think in the Punjab there was always the Gurmukhi Punjabi-based theses which were done.
Yeah.
Okay, that they carried on being produced. Some were very good, some were very low level, but basically the literature was being produced at the time.
Okay.
From the West, the actual centres for Sikhism were very, very limited. There wasn't that many what you can call centres of Sikh studies. In England, they were limited.
Of course,
in the US, they've only been, like, if you look at it, say, last 20 years.
they just started recently. It's Santa Barbara,
exactly, Santa
Berkeley
Barbara,
University.
Berkeley, you know, you've got some in New York as well. So
that's just recently,
Exactly. So there was no kind of perspective for people to write about. I mean, there were theses written in the 70s and 80s, but they were like, you know, Sikhism, and, you know, they were very kind of...
I think, I mean, when I read it, I sort of think, okay, they're obviously looking from their point of view.
Yeah.
Whether they're being positive or negative, they're coming from their point of view.
Perspective.
Yeah,
I mean,
perspective.
You know, everyone has their kind of perspective on, you know, how they want to approach a subject. And Western methods of kind of dissecting a subject, looking at a subject, are kind of different to when you look at the Eastern methods. So someone doing a PhD, for instance, in Punjabi University, Patiala, would approach it differently for someone, say, doing it at, I don't know, Birmingham University, for instance. You know, there's different ways of doing it because they would use a different kind of method, and the ones in Punjab will use a different kind of method. I don't think there's a right or wrong way.
I think both, okay. If you look, I mean, again, you know, as I say, because from the Western perspective, it is all about, okay, let's get to the smallest point and to see how that fits in like a jigsaw puzzle.
100%.
And I do feel from the Eastern perspective, it's like, okay, where is the connection coming from, you know, sort of thing. You know, something you said at the beginning is simply because, you know, I'm always having discussions with various people. And one guy asked me, he said, you know what I find interesting about Sikhs is that you had an Anglo-Sikh war, okay? But Sikhs, he said to me, Sikhs don't seem to have an issue with the British.
Right, okay.
I said, okay. He goes, no, you know, he said, you know, you look at other places where they've, you know, had fights and there's always a kind of, you know, a barrier. He said, but Sikhs on the whole don't seem to have that. And I thought about it, and I asked one or two Sikhs, you know, just generally, so these were no people of authority, so just general. They said, well, that's because we never actually lost against the British. It's our own stupid fault. You know?
That is a good way of looking at it, really, because it was close.
Yeah.
End of the day, everyone who's written about, even the British who have written about the Anglo-Sikh Wars has said it was fairly close. So as a result of that, you know, I can understand where some people may be coming from. But also at the same time, to say there wasn't any resentment is not quite correct either. But also, secondly, there was always that resistance movements in the background. Yes.
Okay.
There was always.
So I want to delve in deeper into that, right? So you know, So tell me more then. Okay.
Okay, so these resistance movements, I mean, obviously, like, what you notice is, if we look at the period from 1800 to, say, the 1900, and we look at the British coming into India, I mean, they came in the 18th century anyway, so, you know, slowly by slowly they were coming in.
Yeah. Was it through the East India Company?
Yeah, exactly. The East India Company was, I mean, some people say it's a pretense, which it could have been, but that pretense did take a number of years before they fulfilled their mission or whatever they wanted to do.
And then the throne took over.
Essentially, it was trade. Is what they came in for, the East India Trading Company.
Yeah.
So you get them coming in, and they're actually, you know, it's a different kind of British from, say, 1780s up to the early part of the 1800s as well, to the British at the Anglo-Sikh Wars, and after the Anglo-Sikh Wars. Because what you find is, say, the exploratory phase of the British at that time was, okay, who are these Sikhs, okay?
All right.
So, for instance, I can cite someone like Charles Wilkins, for instance, who was based in Calcutta, okay? Based in Calcutta, but he was told that he should go and visit Patna Sahib.
Okay.
So, you know, he's an Orientalist, so he's delving into Sanskrit at this time.
Okay.
But someone says to him, you're going to Benares, visit this college in Patna.
So there's a okay.
We'll delve into what college exactly means, but he's been told about this college and these strange people called the Sikhs.
Okay.
So he goes to this college in Patna, 1781. And what he does is he does an intricate, detailed analysis of what he saw at Patna Sahib. Okay? And generally we can say it was the Takht.
Okay.
Patna Sahib, Harimandir Sahib, Patna Sahib, where Guru Gobind Singh Ji was born. And he does an actual analysis of it in terms of what he sees when he goes and enters the Dharamsala, Gurdwara, but he calls it a college. So maybe from his point of view, he saw it as an institution of learning. Now, what we need to know and what we need to remember is many institutions of the Sikhs were learning centres. It may not necessarily be in Patna Sahib, but even in the Punjab. When you went somewhere to see the Sikhs, it would be a learning centre. Could you just expand on that slightly? So he would enter. Yeah. Okay, and it'd be like a university type thing? I wouldn't go so far as to a university type, but to him it was, whilst it was, his description resembles what we see today as a Gurdwara. Okay. But there was probably adjoining rooms, there was like students there. Okay, so I understand now. Yeah, so there were students there, so to him the impression came of a college. But quite rightly, he describes it as he has to take his shoes off before entering. He's been told that, he understands it. He goes in there and he can actually make out the words which are being recited as well because of his Sanskrit leanings. He's studying that. And interestingly, he actually, from his description, he actually breaks down what he's hearing, and he apparently hears the Ardas. Because he's actually kind of, his description mirrors what we see in the present day Ardas as well. So he describes the Ardas. He describes the Guru Granth Sahib being taken in and taken out. He then also talks about Sri Dasam Granth Sahib as well. So at the same location. At the same location. At the same location. It's interesting because a lot of people say, you know, Sri Dasam Granth Sahib, we're talking about, you know, the 1800s, and I'll talk about Malcolm later as well, who does descriptions of Sri Dasam Granth Sahib as well. But Charles Wilkins is actually telling you about Sri Dasam Granth and Guru Granth Sahib actually at Takht Patna Sahib itself. Oh, wow. And it's not unusual because of the fact that Guru Gobind Singh Ji was born at this location. So his Granth would, you know, naturally be at that location. But the description is so actual modern, it's absolutely unbelievable because it's exactly in terms of how you would see going to a Gurdwara in this present day. That's what makes his account so interesting because it's so modern, and it's strange how modern it is. I'd love to sort of, you know, read a bit on this. Not a problem. I can put this information up on my own website, gsman.com. So, you know, after this show, the next couple of days, I'll put this account up. And in 2008, I actually wrote a kind of write-up on Takht Patna Sahib, the history of Patna Sahib, in terms of, you know, the Hukamname which are at Patna Sahib, the relics which are at Patna Sahib, and I actually incorporated Wilkins' analysis as well, and I also mentioned some of the manuscripts manuscripts which are based in Dr. Patna. So it's an excellent read. It was published in 2008 in Sansafai magazine, which is published in Jalandhar. So, you know, it's a nice write-up, because the way I do my writing is I like to incorporate the British views, but also incorporate the Sikh views. And
it's nice that's a nice balance, Gurinder, because, you know, we need that sort of balance going sort of thing.
100%. But, you know, not all biased towards the British, not all biased towards the Sikh view. You need something to say, well, you know, this is Sikh history, but what does the British say about it? And then try and amalgamate both ideas.
What I like about what you're saying is that, because before, I mean, it seems to come across that is mainly, like from the Western perspective, they were giving their accounts and writing it down, but obviously they doing it from their perspective.
That's correct.
Okay, and you're now looking at it from the other perspective and the British perspective as well.
Yeah.
You know, and you can see where the British of old were coming from and where obviously Apne come from as well. So it's a nice balance, because I think that's the art of being a true historian, is being involved while still being neutral.
Yeah, 100%. I think, you know, with all the research I've been doing for 10 years, what I've found is that you can get caught up in everything.
Yeah.
You can get caught up in the blizzard, essentially.
Of course.
Because, you know...
There's so much. Yeah.
There's so much information, but there's so many people maybe pulling you in different ways as well.
The red herrings?
There's red herrings, but there's also vested interest sometimes as well. Some people may say, well, you know, when you talk about, say, Dasam Granth, can you talk about this? When you talk about Sri Dasam Granth, can you talk about this? Now, you know, people can pull you in certain directions, but the way I like to view it is, let's kind of try and keep a discussion going. Yeah. Okay, let's try and not hate anyone, whether they believe in the writings of Guru Gobind Singh or whether they don't believe in them.
See, I mean, I love reading past Sri Dasam Granth. You know, when I look at it, you know, even today, why do people, when I say people, I'm just talking, you know, just why do they feel so challenged?
It's a very good question. I mean, basically, now we need to go back into reading as an individual now. We need to go back, reading as an individual, getting your information from other sources. Now, if we're all learned people, as what Guru Gobind Singh wanted us to be, we wouldn't have this problem. Because if you look at his darbar, he had his gavis there. Yeah. And what were the gavis doing? They were actually recreating, rewriting poetry of that particular time. Okay. Many of these were Hindu themes. Yeah. It's quite clear. You look at some of the manuscripts which are available, okay, they used to pray to their own deities. They used to pray to Lakshmi, they used to pray to all the different gods which were out there, and then they used to start their Gurmukhi works. Okay. And at the end, they used to praise Guru Gobind Singh Ji, because these writings were actually in the court as a darbar were accepted. Okay? Okay. They're all accepted. Yeah. Whether Guruji believed in them or not is, you know, is a different question. It's more a case of literature was being produced in the darbar. And this literature, the gavis were paid more than his soldiers.
Really?
Yeah, according to Dr. Dilip Singh, who wrote the great book, The Turban and the Sikhs, okay. He writes that it was the gavis who were the most, well, one of the important sources for him, because to him, it was this learning, this knowledge which was actually, you know, making the Sikhs into better people. Yes, they were warriors. The Khalsa had to train in Shastra Vidya. You know, they had to be adept in battle tactics. But it was this Vidya, other kind of Vidya, this knowledge, which also made the Sikh a better person and, you know, gave him foresight. Yeah. Because in Hindustan, for instance, at that particular time, you've got these different categories of individuals. You've got the Hindus, you've got the Mohammedans, you've got Sikhs, you've got individuals, and how do you connect to these people if you don't know about their history?
Of course, yeah.
So, you know, so talking about how it fits into the modern age, for instance, I think if we learnt more, if we read more, if we understood more, I think some of the issues that we have or posed, I think, so automatically die down. So, for instance, if you had manuscript knowledge about things, you would look at things in a different perspective. If you looked at some of the 18th century sources or texts, you would look at the subject in a different matter. It's when you start looking at things on YouTube, or if you start looking at things on Facebook,
and you use that as your source of encyclopedic knowledge.
100%. And you know, it's unfortunate. I mean, that has its you know values. It has its, you know, good points as well.
It has to be taken with a pinch of salt, doesn't it?
It has to be, because unless you're doing that research, I mean, you know, back in the days, all the Sikhs used to be learned individuals. They used to be reading and reading all the time. And one of the key things about writing this particular book, Sri Dasam Granth Sahib, was to make sure people actually start reading again.
You know, Gurinder Singh, it's really good because I talked about this book 6 months ago, and I still, you know, I keep reading it because every time I go into it, it's Sangaji. You know, as I say, I really recommend this book. It's really nice. But what's interesting is I love this picture at the back. I'm just going to turn this around because it's the Anandpuri Bir of Guru Gobind Singh. Hopefully, Sangaji, you can see this. I'm just, you know, doing it accordingly. But could you just take us through this picture?
No, 100%. I mean, what the key thing for putting the picture there was that one of the oldest manuscripts of Sri Dasam Granth Sahib is called the Anandpuri Bead. Okay.
Okay.
And the dates in it are 1695, 1696. Okay?
1695. Okay. So. Okay.
During the Guru's period, you know, early phases of, you know, when he's building up towards the Khalsa, and that actual picture itself is supposed to be a true depiction of the Guru, because this actual picture is from that manuscript from that particular time.
Okay, so he's.
It's considered a self-portrait of the Guru. Well,
Really?
not self-portrait, a portrait.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's sitting down.
In this, it's a courtly, you know, kind of picture. He's in a courtly state. You've got the Teer there, yeah? He's holding up the Teer. You've got the bow there, you know. So, you know, you've got the attendant behind him. He's sitting on cushions.
And the attendant is just...
That's it.
Like air conditioning.
Exactly, yeah. So you've got him in that regal kind of sense that he's a Pasha. Okay. And that's why, you know, he was always known as the Dasam Pasha, the 10th king.
Okay. And he appears to be in, you know, what we call the rock pose, you know, in terms of... But I suppose they tend to sit like that as well, and it's very good for you, so it's a very good pose to have.
And the key thing here is Pasha. Let's look at this word Pasha. Dasam Pasha. The actual Granth is called Dasam Pasha Ka Granth. Dasam Granth was a name that was given a lot later. It was actually given round about in the 1880s, around that time.
Okay, now
the early
this is
the early manuscripts always called it Dasam Pasha Ka Granth because it's Guru Gobind Singh's Granth. It's nobody else's Granth. But it was shortened later on to Dasam Granth, and traditionally now it's also referred to as Dasam Granth. But it's Dasam Pasha Ka Granth, and the earliest beads and, you know, manuscripts like the Anandpuri bead refer to it as that.
Okay.
The Bhattanasar bead of 1698 refers to it as that. So, you know.
So history is dictating what it was called.
Exactly.
And somewhere along the line,
you get that change. You've got this change for whatever reason, you know.
Okay.
We don't want to go into the intricacies, but the change does take place, and, you know, so it takes on a different meaning. But because Dasam Granth is not Dasam Pasha Ka Granth.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Do you know, I never knew that, so it's kind of taking me back a bit. Okay. Well, I suppose that's what you do.
Exactly. You know, I mean, sometimes these little things, these little intricacies are, you know, which makes the subject interesting for me, because it's like, well, where does this word come from? Where does this piece of information come from? How do we connect the dots in terms of Sikh history?
You know, if you look at a picture, and they say, you know, pictures of 10,000 words or something, I don't know what the saying is. But could we not sometimes perceive it the wrong way? It's like, there's a picture, what's the artist trying to say? I'm talking from a historical perspective, you know? So we have to kind of guess sometimes.
100%. I think, you know, that's the art of painting as well, because for a painter, they're trying to portray something. What's in their eyes, what's in their view. And, you know, in the 20th century, you start getting these pictures and depictions of what the Guru is supposed to look like, which are interestingly different to what, say, if we try and get the earliest depictions of the Gurus, they're slightly different.
Yeah, I've seen that, yeah. I want to delve into that deeper, perhaps on a or something, because I think that's a topic within itself, you know.
100%, yeah.
I love that. When, from a historical perspective, when the British came in, you know, you have, you know,
Wilkins we talked about.
Yeah, no, but I was thinking from a different perspective. You know, when they went to Africa as well.
Okay.
You know, they had their missionaries. Did they try the same with the Sikhs as well? You know, in terms of, you know, hey, this is great what you do.
Yeah.
Okay, you know, we have our own faith as well. You know, is it something? And I'm not talking from a negative perspective.
Yeah,
I'm just talking just from a general perspective and a historical perspective.
It's very interesting actually, because when you look at the missionaries and how they came into India and how they came into the Punjab, it's not as straightforward as people would think. Because when you had the East India Company coming in, they were limited in terms of the missionaries that came with them.
Okay.
They didn't want the missionaries to come with them.
The East India Company didn't want them?
They didn't want them at all, because they came into trade.
Okay, so they're purely from a business perspective.
Business perspective,
Yeah.
political, and they actually even knew that if they came in with the missionaries, it's going to put off their trade.
Okay.
So the heads of the company were more trade-based, oriented.
Yeah.
But here in England, the missionaries wanted to be on board. So if you start looking at the 1780s, you start looking at Wilkins' time, you start looking at Calcutta, and you start this centre of learning being based here in Calcutta, they're actually educationalists in terms of they want to actually, you know, promote Sanskrit, for instance. They want to actually keep it in tune with what's going on at that particular time.
Yeah.
But the calls of the missionaries are happening. They're actually now calling on the parliamentarians here in England.
So they're quite powerful, aren't they?
Very powerful. Yeah. And what they're saying is, look, we need to be out there in India. We need to be teaching Indians.
Let's educate them.
We want to teach the Indians. Exactly. We want to be teaching the Indians. So what happens is that an act gets passed.
Oh, really? Okay.
In 1813, okay? And I'll just turn to my notes for that.
Oh,
okay?
do you know what? I was just about to praise you there. You know, I was just about to say.
I can't remember.
He's got it. Oh no! If you hadn't done that, you know, this guy's on total recall.
Can we edit that bit out? It was called the Charter Act of 1813, and what that allowed was for missionaries to actually come into India.
Okay.
Because they weren't allowed before that time. They probably did come.
Okay, they weren't allowed.
It was an act of Parliament virtually that gave them the actual idea that they could actually come into India and they could start developing and actually teaching Christianity.
Okay.
It was 1813. It developed over a period of time. It was incrementalism, so it wasn't like over a period of year all of Punjab is in, you know, hands of the Christians, or there's Christian churches everywhere. It wasn't. It was slowly over a period of time.
Okay.
But it was this particular act which allowed the missionaries to come in, and they came in abundance as well.
All right.
So they came, and you know, and some of them never left. Because the Christians are still in Punjab, you know, in a democracy, anyone's allowed to preach.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, you know...
Did they do any good? I know we can come on the negative, but did they do any good in regards to the infrastructure, or just general, or...
Well, let's not look at missionaries there, let's look at the British in totality.
And that's a good...
What do we normally see when we talk about the British?
Listen, if you ever watched, you know, I don't know, Channel 4 or something, and it's the biggest network in the whole world, you know, it's got to be the railways.
100%, it's the railways. You got it. It's the railways. So, you know, if you look at it from certain perspectives, the British would have, you know, done something to aid the infrastructure, but they would have been doing it for themselves as well.
Yeah.
Because it's trade routes. If they've got a better railway lines across India,
communication,
trade is better for them as well. So, you know, there's this dual purpose. There is for the sake of India, but it's
they're very methodical that way. You know, they're very good at building and sorting things out that way. I think.
I think they've always done that.
No matter where they go in the world. So, you know, that's
and also hinging on that is their record keeping as well, because they were great record keepers, and this is really
very organised.
Yeah, and really important for us because we get a lot of information about the Sikhs from the British records.
Isn't that amazing? It's almost like, you know, had they not been there, we perhaps wouldn't have half our history.
100%, because these records we can still see now.
Yeah.
And we can also see records of treaties that were made as well between the British and the Sikhs, because they were translated. A lot of it was done in Persian during the times of Maharaja Ranjit Singh, but then they would then translate it back to English again. So, you know, it's interesting. But with regards to the missionaries, at that point, at the start, of the 1800s, we start seeing them coming in, but the impact is very limited at that particular time.
What sort of response do you think they would have got, though?
I think it's twofold, because the way the missionaries worked was they would come in as educators.
Okay.
They may even like come into certain villages and say, look, we're going to start developing the irrigation for you. Okay. So there's water for people to drink.
So there's a positive effect on one end at least.
Yeah.
But then obviously there's a reason behind that.
Of course, there would have to be a reason behind it. And what we notice is in the early periods of, say, 1810, 1820, the Britishers who are actually describing the Sikhs are still on the whole positive. Okay. Now we can start off with Dr. Leyden, who was a poet, Orientalist, in depth in 36 languages.
Gosh.
From Scotland he came.
Okay.
Goes to Calcutta, and he starts translating all these Indian texts. But as part of that, interestingly, he also translates Sikh works as well. And he translates Sri Bajata Natak, Guru Gobind Singh's Bani. The whole composition.
Wow.
We're not talking about certain portions, certain, phrases, certain aspects, because, Bajata Natak is a historical kind of composition.
Yes.
He translates the whole composition.
He translates it. Does he translate it accurately?
From my view,
yeah.
I think he, at that point, in terms of what he knew about Sikhs, he did an absolutely fantastic job of translating Bajata Natak.
Okay.
Because, apart from that, there was another one did roughly about the 1850s, that was done in two portions. That was never complete. Then we get to the time of Macauliffe, who writes his history of the Sikhs as well, and he doesn't translate it either. So you've got nobody during that period actually translating the text in full, but we have it at the early period of the 19th century, early 10 period, where he's actually translated the whole composition.
Why do you think he did that?
Because he had this leaning towards understanding all languages. Because I've done a lot of work on Dr. Leyden, and the second booklet that you have.
Let me have a quick look.
Underneath there. The cover itself is actually.
Let's have a look.
Hopefully
you can see this, Sanjay. It's beautiful. It says here, Dr. Leyden's Punjabi translations.
And that actual writing on the front there, if you just turn to that for one moment, Sri Bajata Natak by Guru Gobind Singh, and it says, translated from the Sikh by Dr. Leyden. It actually said that.
Oh, it does actually say, yes.
It does say that on there. So,
Where can people get hold of this, if it is...
The actual translations are in the British Library.
Oh, right.
And over a year and a half ago, we did a project to bring these translations out. It came certain to me that these first English translations of Sikh texts had to be brought out to the open. The Dr. Leyden translation of Bajata Natak were well known, but in 2006, they weren't well known, they were just known about.
Yes.
In 2006, I discovered the Prem Samarag, a Granth which is also an old Granth, again translated by Dr. Leyden. I found this in the British Library. So now we're talking about
these treasures have all been there
for hundreds of years. So what we have now is more than one composition. We have several compositions.
Wow.
So we've got Bajata Natak, we have the Prem Samarag, we have this rare text called the Kurka of Guru Gobind Singh Ji.
See,
very rare text, not many people would have heard of this. And we have Bhai Gurdas, we've got Bhai Gurdas Singh we're talking about, the actual composition, he translates as well. And so, it was very interesting in 2006 when I found this Prem Samarag, because what we find is that some people had issues with dating the Prem Samarag Granth. And Dr. W.H. MacLeod, a well-known writer of Sikhism, was always pushing the date of Prem Samarag into the late, 19th century. And he'd also just released his book on the Prem Samarag. He'd done a translation of the Prem Samarag himself. He wasn't aware of Dr. Leyden's translation. So
this was pure coincidence?
Pure coincidence. That I find the text just at the time he's released his English translations. So I contact him.
Okay.
And, I provide him with the translation. And I say to him, you've done your translations, but, were you aware that in, you know, the early 1800 period there was these, and he was actually gobsmacked. He was actually, you know, he couldn't believe it. And, you know, I write about it in here as well because, you know, I thought, you know, it was an important kind of text that he should know about and write about. And what he says is this, basically. In the Sikhs of the Khalsa, I expressed the view that the dating of the work Prem Samarag was located in the first half of the 19th century, the middle or the later years of Ranjit Singh's reign. This has proved to be incorrect. I was informed of its existence by Gurinder Singh Mann of Leicester in the United Kingdom. So what happened is he actually has to write a rebuttal to his own work based on these translations. And he was very reluctant to do that, but in this particular case, he had to recognise that the dating of Prem Samarag was of an earlier date.
And it's important, in a sense, just from a point of view, because then that creates even more aspects in terms of, okay, the timeline. So
100%, because, like, you know, you've got scholars out there, historians, who don't actually kind of admit to anything until they've, you know, they're the kind of scholars who won't actually see it clear-cut, it's written, you know, there's a date there for it to happen. Some scholars, like Dr. W.H. MacLeod, were very reluctant to actually, you know, admit datings. He would push the dating of Sikh texts to a later period. You know, that was one example of, you know, how he would have to kind of, you know, change his view on the actual text itself.
You know what's interesting is, and I think this happens to a few people, is that it's fascinating, you know, the historical dates and getting into it. But I think sometimes we think of there was a period where it was just all Punjabis, okay, or India, within India, okay, where it wasn't India such as we know it today. And then the English came in, but it was never like that, really, was it? Because you mentioned Maharaja Ranjit Singh's army.
That's correct.
He had generals in there who were from different parts of the world. I remember looking at this photograph many years ago of, I think it was Napoleon's army.
Okay.
And there was a Sardar in there.
Yeah.
He was of French origin. I was thinking,
yeah.
what's a Sardar doing in Napoleon's army, you know?
Exactly.
There's all these influences, and even in Guru Gobind Singh Ji, you know, now you have to go, you know, more on the historical perspective, when he had his stitches in.
Yeah.
You know, it was...
Coal.
Yeah, so...
That's a very interesting aspect. I want to touch on 2 points there.
Yeah.
One is the actual doctor which attended to Guru Gobind Singh. I'm actually writing a little bit of a history about this doctor as we speak. I mean, I'm writing a book on the British Sikhs anyway.
Yeah.
I'm going to go a little bit into depth about this particular doctor as to who he was. I think I've got a right idea of as to who he was.
Okay, I see a twinkle in your eye, so I'm curious.
So, you know, that's probably better left off for another time.
Sure.
I've gone in a little bit into it in terms of who the doctor may have been and what was the basis behind him going to Nadir at that particular time as well.
Okay.
But you touched on another point, which is the actual generals of Maharaja Ranjit Singh as well, having this influence from Europeans. You know, you had Avtabul, you had all these other generals coming in as well, Allard, Court, for instance. And there's a fantastic book which is written by Bobby Singh Bansal. I don't know if you've come across this book. It's you know, it's called The Lines Ferengis.
Okay.
And he's done some great research. He's from Leicester as well.
Okay.
Same part of town.
Promoting Leicester here.
Same part of town as well.
Well, thank you for coming to London.
Exactly. And he's written about a history of the generals of Ranjit Singh as well. It's a very great book, and you know, you should everyone should try and have a read of that, because he goes a bit more into depth in terms of the generals, in terms of the descendants of the generals. What are they doing now in France, Italy, and things like that? So that historical link is still here even now. We talk about it in Ranjit Singh's time, but that link is still there.
I suppose it's not that many generations ago, was it really? Yeah.
And in some people's case, it may just be great-grandfather or something like that.
You know what's really interesting is, and it just came to me in terms of this, I remember watching something on a documentary on Channel 4 or something, and they went to some house in Surrey, and there's a guy, he must have been in his 80s, you know, and they said it was his grandfather who started the East India Company.
Okay.
I was thinking, how could his grandfather? I thought, isn't that too short? But
it looks short to me. I mean, without.
I mean, of course. I mean, you know, when you're just scanning through the channels, and somebody goes, oh, you know, and I think they're talking about famous
Right.
descendants
Okay.
and so
Unless
forth.
that program was made in the 1920s or something.
Honestly, I think it was literally made about within the last 5 years.
Okay,
I'll have to look it up, you know,
No,
what it was.
it's a good perspective, and you know the timeline you're correct is fairly short.
Yeah.
Even in our own Sikh history is still relatively short.
Yes, you're right.
People forget that sometimes. People think we're talking about thousands of years. We're talking about hundreds of years in terms of how our Sikh history is formed, you see. So there's still a lot to play for in terms of where we can still find out some original research. There's a lot of capacity out there.
No, that's the fascinating bit. But what I also find interesting is that the amount of work that appears that you still have to do to get information. I guess it's probably because people from India didn't write things down.
It wasn't as extensive.
Yeah.
Or if it was written down, it was kept with families, okay? It was kept with groups of people.
Yeah.
The idea that it's not there is also wrong as well. It's there, but it's kind of locating. It may be kept with certain individuals. So, but the tracking of information is hard.
Yes. What I like is that you said it's 2006. You're finding new information.
Yeah.
You know, and that too, it's just in your local library. I mean, you know.
100%, and you know, it's these kind of things which kind of, you know, make me want to research more.
Okay, so
because
what do you want to do from here? You know, what's your, you know, okay, what do you want to achieve from here now?
I think the key thing is I've written about 3 Dasam Granth Sahib.
Okay.
That's one book. Okay.
Where can people get this? I've had a lot of people ask me questions. And was it on Amazon? I can't recall now.
You can get this from Amazon.
Yes.
You can get it directly from the publishers, which is www.archimedespress.co.uk.
Okay.
You can go onto my site, gsman.com.
gsman.com.
gsman.com. You can get the link from
gsman.com. Okay.
That's correct. So the links are available. It's like I said, we've achieved in bringing out a palatable book for the masses, which is like easy to understand. I wanted to create something with Bhai Sahib Gobind Singh, who also wrote this with me.
That's right. It was Gobind Singh who came on actually, I think 6 months ago.
That's correct.
So yes,
the whole idea was to have something palatable, have something which is easy to read, because Sikhs don't read.
Excuse me? Did you just hear that? Okay,
Sikhs don't read
enough.
In terms of enough, in terms of important information, in terms of actually the right information. Okay. So the key idea was, I want to get people reading again.
So you need to have a book. And I don't mean Facebook.
I like that. It's not necessary.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself.
It's not necessary to have a book, but to get Sikhs reading again, we wanted to create something which is palatable.
No, absolutely.
Palatable.
Easy
headings. Questions, 50 questions, 50 answers. So, you know, something which reads and guides the learner towards a goal.
Well, these are sort of questions that you had yourself?
I had questions myself. I had questions posed to the website, www.3dasamgranth.com, which I set up in 2008.
Oh, was it? Is that yours?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay.
We set that up...
yeah, because I look at that quite regularly. You know, what we'll do is we'll make sure on the Conscious Living website we'll put these details up as well. You know, there's a lot of information. Sangaji, I know that normally it's a relaxed show in terms of, but it's so important. I felt I've got Gurinder, you know, and just going over this. So, you know, if you could write a little bit of this, we'll put it on our website so people can have it in chunks. You know, if that's okay with you.
That's okay. I can send you something. Yeah.
And we're going to have you on. Again, I mean, I feel we've only literally just touched the surface, you know?
Okay.
I don't know. Do you feel we just touched the surface?
I think so. I think there's a lot in depth. There's a lot of information, out there. And, you know...
You've got another book here.
Sketch of the Sikhs is really important as well, because Lieutenant Colonel Malcolm, wrote this book in 1812, the Sketch of the Sikhs. And in it, he actually describes it vividly in terms of the Sikh perspective.
Yeah.
He's talking about, you know, Guru Nanak in, you know, great terms. He's talking about the Kali Nahangs in great terms. He's talking about Sri Dasam Granth, Guru Granth Sahib in great terms. He's actually, you know, this is the start of the 18 periods which I was talking about. So you've got Leyden, you've got Malcolm, who are talking pretty positive in terms
is
of
it because
how the Sikhs are like.
because they're curious? I
They're
mean,
curious.
They must have been.
They're curious.
Who are these people?
Yeah, exactly. It's the mannerisms.
Yeah.
What are these Sikhs about? What do they do? How can we learn more about them?
Okay.
But this ties in, like I said, in terms of these missionaries, because they're in at the same time as well, but the perspective is very...
So what do you think, by the missionaries coming in, okay, whatever their purpose, it, you know, for a few of the British at the time, it would have been getting in the way of me trying to understand?
I think so. I think people like Malcolm didn't want the missionaries in there.
Yeah.
Because if we take it a step forward, let's take it a step forward and let's take it down to the Anglo-Sikh Wars, okay?
Okay.
Let's take it to the Anglo-Sikh Wars when the territories and domains of Punjab have been subjugated.
Yeah.
And that's it. By that time, Maharaja Ranjit Singh was deposed.
Yes.
You know, he died at that time.
Yes.
And then we get to the point of Maharaja Dilip Singh. And it's really interesting. I bought this text here for everyone to read. It's an actual treaty signed by the Lahore court and the British. This is in 1849. But I want to actually try and, I know it's limited on time, but try and speak.
Read absolutely,
it It's the terms granted to and accepted by Maharaja Dilip Singh in 1849.
Okay.
Okay, so basically these are the terms of kind of surrender, in a sense, by Maharaja Dilip Singh and the Lahore court after the Anglo-Sikh Wars.
Okay.
In it, I'm just going to give some of the precepts which are in there. I mean, it's fairly detailed. It says, His Highness the Maharaja Dilip Singh shall resign from himself, his heirs, and his successors all right, title and claim to be sovereignty of the Punjab and to any sovereign power whatever. So he could no longer have any claim to Punjab. That's the first thing. All property of the state of whatever description and wherever shall be found shall be confiscated to the Honourable East India Company in part payment of the debt due to the state of Lahore, be surrendered by the state of Lahore to the British government and to the expenses of the war. So they were saying even the Anglo-Sikh Wars, the Sikhs should pay money for it because the British had a cost. That's how far they went.
Wow.
And the key thing here is the gem called the Colonial, which is taken from Shah Suja by Maharaja Ranjit Singh, shall be surrendered by the Maharaja of Lahore to the Queen of England. As we know, this was taken. This is an interesting document because this is an actual English translation. And it's been signed by Maharaja Dilip Singh, Raja Tej Singh, Lord Dalhousie, Raja Dina Nath, Elliot, all these individuals, Sardar Sher Singh, agents of. So what we get is a point where the British have got to a point, you know, after the Anglo-Sikh Wars, they've actually deposed our king, Maharaja Dilip Singh, and then the missionaries start doing their work now.
Okay, I suppose they've got a good setting now, isn't it? Okay,
exactly.
It's like,
They've broken down the actual backbone of what the Sikhs are supposed to be about. They've deposed the king, and now we get the missionaries fully fledged actually doing their work.
Yes. And
it's interesting because I've got another document here which is really interesting. It's the report of the Punjab Missionary Conference at Lahore, 1862-1863.
Okay.
So the missionaries all get together and they say, well, you know, what are we going to do to actually convert the Sikhs now? Okay. So they're going tooth and nail now.
Okay.
They're really actually saying
full steam ahead now.
Full steam ahead now. They're actually saying, well, what do we need to do? And there's a guy called Reverend William Keane. Okay.
Yeah.
And he says, he talks about the Sikhs and he says, well, okay, what are we going to do?
Okay.
He talks about the Granths and he gives some information about the Granths, which is interesting.
We've got less than 60 seconds.
60 seconds, okay. And in the end, he basically goes in depth and he actually tells you in no certain times that the work, I'll say this in entirety, as the influence of Nanak's teaching was for good, so was that of Gobind for evil. They were trying to separate out the works of Guru Nanak and Guru Gobind Singh Ji to actually say, let's divide them by dividing the Sikh Gurus.
Oh, that is fascinating. Singh, you're going to have to come back.
Okay.
Even if the sun doesn't, I need to know more, you know. Sangji, I hope you enjoyed. We are rapidly running out of time, you know, and it's just, you know, there's just so much information. And the last bit has got me even more curious now.
But we left it on a note where, you know, which hopefully people can, you know, see for themselves how the inroads are being made.
Yeah,
by the
absolutely.
British,
No,
you know.
it's fascinating because at the end of the day, history is history, and hopefully from history we can learn towards a better future. You know,
agree.
So you know, I'm all for it. So yeah, hopefully we get you going. We'll Sanghaji, what we'll do is at least some of the information today. Okay, is it gsmun.com? We'll put details of your website on the Conscious Living website as well. And so, you know, at least the Sangha who are interested, they can have a look, you know, and, you know, hopefully delve more deeper, you know. So that's
I mean,
great.
that's the whole idea, getting other people to, you know, delving into the Sikh history as well a lot more.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming. And Sanghaji, thank you for watching. We'll have a lot more. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.